on this proportional equation solving. It's going to look like a regular equation here pretty quick. Okay, yeah, we're going to be doing a little cross multiplying, but there's one thing I'm going to make note of. I'm going to write it in red here because it's so important. Whenever you see plus or minus in one of your terms, if you see what's called a binomial term, which means there's more than one term there, like our x minus 2 over here, you always put parentheses around them. And you'll see here soon why I kind of stress that a little bit. So anywhere on the front of this page right now where you see a plus or a minus with something that's going on, you need to go ahead and get that in there at cross multiplying here with parentheses. Because as Marcus had mentioned just a minute ago, when I go to cross multiply, so basically what I'm doing is I'm doing the 4 times the 10. Some of you may have been taught this is like a butterfly type thing. You might use it that way. And then I've got 5 times the x minus 2. And the reason we always want to put the parentheses around this is, if I don't, you just think it's 5x minus 2, and you go about your business. And I can understand why you think that way. But right, because now what I have to do, I know 4 times 10 is 40, but I have to do the distributive property over here on the right side of my equation. 5x minus 10. Okay, sort of just like that last inequality we did on the review sheet. And you're like, oh, this actually does look normal now. It's just one step to get us there, because now I can work on getting my x term alone, and I'm going to be good to go. Okay, so we're going to add 10 to that. Okay, and then divide by 5. So it's just like the equations we've been doing, except instead of being given the equation right away, we have to go ahead and work that out. Okay? But that's the same setup that it's going to be on every single one of these. Bump up a little bit here. Okay, now here I don't see any pluses or minuses, so I don't have to do any parentheses. But I do have to multiply 5 times 9, 45. It doesn't matter actually. If I would have done the 2d times 10 and gotten 20d and I'd have put that first, that would have been quite all right. Good question. Yeah, you can do either diagonal first. This one we kind of like. There's only one step to get d by itself. Okay. So if I divide by 20, and you can get decimals sometimes on these. Don't let that put you into a panic. And what was it again? Yeah, I was going to say, I think you punched something else in. 2.25. Okay. So again, nothing that's going to be, too incredibly bad. But again, if you're ever not sure on what to do, I've kind of gone step by step here along the right edge and just said, if this isn't done, do this, and then do this. And it's kind of like steps that we're going to be working with. We move down here to 3. Okay, I got my parentheses in because I saw plus or minus on a couple of these. And again, just to show it doesn't matter, let's say we decide we're going to do this one first. Whenever I see the parentheses, I actually write them out each time. Just because when you go to distribute, there's lots of things that can go wrong if you're not careful. So when I distribute on the left side, what do I end up with? 12x minus 8. All right. Okay, and on the right, 8 times x is 8x. 8 times 4 is 32. Ooh, here's a new issue we haven't dealt with today. Well, I see what you're doing, but there's one thing I want to do first. So I look and I get the distributing, and if I look at my little list there to the right, number 3 says get all x's to one side if they aren't already. These are on opposite sides of the equals, so I can't just put them together. I've got to do an opposite, and it doesn't matter which one I do. Now, this is just me. I don't like dealing with the negative numbers a whole lot, so normally I'll look at the x that's smaller, 8 smaller than 12, and I'll say, okay, I'm going to move this one. So I'm going to move 8x to each side. Notice x's stay with x's. That matters. 12x minus 8x is 4x, and then everything else that's a plain old number just gets brought down. So now we're in a situation like we have been. I need to get 4x by itself. Add the 8. You're like, whew, this can be quite the process. What we're doing here is kind of checking out your, not just your patience, but we're also checking out your attention to detail. Okay? And that sometimes these problems can take a little while, and that's why we don't do like 50 of them a day. That'd be kind of crazy. Yep, and we're going to head that way next. This is what I like to call the oddball problem, our last one here on the front. Because when I multiply here, 32 times 2 is 64. But then we get y times y. Now, we haven't dealt with this yet. We have? That's true. Yeah, we have gotten a thing with exponents here or there, but y times y is y to the second power. So whenever I get something to the second power, and it'll happen every once in a while, we're going to take the square root of both sides. And there's a square root button on your calculator. If you're not sure what the answer is. Because square and square root are what are called inverses. They're opposites, so they kind of cancel each other out. So what's the square root of 64 going to be? 8. And we're set. So those are the only different types that you can run into on this. What your job is, and it'll kind of give you some practice on equations for tomorrow too, so it's kind of a good idea, is this front part's the note sheet, and our goal is to knock out back. So your task is to complete the problems on the back. Now, reminder, I do this before I even started, just to remind myself, oh yeah, I got to make sure that whenever I've got those multiple terms there, I'm getting them all parenthesed up. Because then when you go to cross multiply, you won't forget about the distributing part. Now again, I'll have some of the answers up for this tomorrow, but again, if you try some of them even right now, just a couple of them here, just to kind of reinforce what we've been doing. And some of you may even be looking at that very first one going, wait a minute, Harty. I don't see one that you did like that. Here's how you're going to fix that. If I see a whole number, I'm just going to make it a fraction. I can always put a 1 underneath if I need to. Because now, 1 times 51 is 51. 17 times x is 17x, and now I can do it. So I wanted to be sure on that one that we got you off to a good start. But again, this will give you good practice on all of your equations and get you very, very, very ready for the quiz tomorrow.